Welcome. Welcome to the video about the 2010 Stanley Cup. They didn't award the cup that year. Good night, everybody. Fine. But I'm doing this one in protest. So 2010 came along, and the Chicago Blackhawks, who had in previous seasons been good and very good, didn't get the job done previously. 49 years. Been 49 years since their last Stanley Cup when they won this one. And 2010 was a big year for them. So while we can look back now and say, well, they've won 3 cups in 6 years and you know, they qualify as a modern day dynasty, the truth is, up until they won this Stanley Cup, there were doubters. There were plenty of people who doubted that Taves and Kane and Keith would get the job done. The idea being maybe they weren't good enough in net, maybe they weren't good enough on the blue line. There was some kind of weakness there with Chicago that prevented them from being the best. Right? Well, during the regular season, Patrick Kane has 88 points. Keith has 69, Taves 68, Sharp 66, Hossa 51, Versteeg 44, Brouwer 40, Ladd 38, Campbell 38, Byfuglien 34, which includes 17 goals, as he didn't just play exclusively on the blue line, he sometimes played forward. Those E's, those are for exits. So after this playoff run, Versteeg, Ladd, and Byfuglien gone out of their top 10 scorers. Due to cap issues and issues with the way contracts were done, they didn't meet a deadline for restricted free agents in terms of matching, or not matching, qualifying offers. So because of that, contracts went through the roof and they had to trade people off. In the playoffs, Taves leads the way with 29 points. Kane's right behind with 28. Sharp has 22. Keith 17. Byfuglien 16, which includes 11 goals. Boland 16. Yes, David Boland, who most of us really couldn't stand him, but that little rat was really good in the playoffs. And I remember in 2011, he almost engineered a huge comeback against the Canucks. He'd been out of the series for the first 3 games. I think it was the first 3, and then he came back for Game 4. And it was like the Canucks had no game plan for Dave Boland, so they just let him score and do whatever he wanted. And they almost blew that series because that little rat Boland was damn good in the playoffs. Hossa had 15 points, Versteeg had 14, and Seabrook had 11. Now, to finish up the Hossa story. Hossa is in Detroit and loses. Goes to Pittsburgh as a hired gun, loses. Goes to Chicago and wins. When he signed in Pittsburgh, he didn't sign for long. When he signed in Detroit, he didn't sign for long. So when he went to Chicago, he's like, now I'm cashing in. So he signed a huge deal, which has cap ramifications this season for the Chicago Blackhawks. Not once they can put him on LTIR, but until then, it has cap ramifications. The Conn Smythe winner this year was Jonathan Taves. And I have to say, Taves was insanely good that year. They played 22 games in the playoffs. They beat Nashville in the first round in 6, which upset me. I really wanted Nashville to win. They beat Vancouver in 6. And again, this is one of those things where, like, Cloutier couldn't beat Detroit. Luongo had problems with Chicago. Luongo had a mental block with Chicago. And not only that, but Vancouver as a team had a mental block about Chicago. You take a look at those goals that were scored on Luongo, and everybody talks about, 7 Wongo, or whatever the hell they want to call them. Most of those shots were teed up between the hash marks. If you're going to let snipers tee up from 5 feet in front of the net, those pucks are going to go in a lot. A lot of the shots that the Canucks had on Antti Niemi were from the point, or they were screenshots, or they were from out at the corner. Luongo was facing point-blank shots. And Chicago had the power to get through and get those shots on net, and Vancouver had the inability to stop them. And that's ultimately why Chicago owned Vancouver during this period in time. Chicago wipes out San Jose in 4 in the conference final, and then they beat Philly in 6. An interesting fact about that final, because full disclosure here, that is the only Stanley Cup final I didn't watch. I didn't care. I was so mad about this, the Vancouver series, and I was mad about what Philly had done too. Because Boston had been up 3-0 against Philly, and Philly won 4 in a row. Based on those two factors, I didn't care who won between Chicago and Philly. I couldn't have cared less. But the interesting thing with this final is, I did watch some of the tail end of Game 6 and saw the celebration before anybody else knew it was a goal. So the puck goes in the net. There's a celebration. There's no red light. The Flyers are wondering what's going on. And Chicago steals the Stanley Cup. This team, in terms of how they were put together, impressive. Again, it's depth. It's depth. It's rolling 4 lines. It's having depth on the blue line. You got Keith, Buffalo, and Seabrook. You have that depth on the blue line, and it's offensive depth and defensive depth. This team went on a run despite Antti Niemi. And I don't say that because I don't like Antti Niemi, so don't get me wrong. But Niemi, all he had to do was make sure that he didn't get blown out. 9-10 save percentage, 2.63 goals against, which is really high for the dead puck era. We're still in the dead puck era, as far as I'm concerned. I think we're still in it now, is what I'm saying. He wins 16, loses 6, and this would be Niemi's big exit. Corey Crawford's getting ready to take over the crease, and Crawford, in terms of goaltenders, was an upgrade on Antti Niemi. Niemi would end up, of course, with San Jose, who they'd swept 4 straight. Niemi's one claim to fame coming out of this was he'd never lost a playoff series. That would continue until he did, which was the following year, against a team that I'll get into tomorrow. But the 49 years without a cup, and they finally won one, was impressive. How this team was put together was impressive, and people say, well, they tanked for it. Kane was a number 1 draft pick. Taves was not. Duncan Keith wasn't a number 1 draft pick. Wasn't even a first-round draft pick. Niemi certainly wasn't a first-rounder. Boland. Come on, not Boland. Versteeg was a steal out of Boston. Sharp, a steal out of Philly. And now they're trying to get this band back together because they've got Sharp back. They've tried Versteeg before. Versteeg's been sacrificed after cup wins twice. I'm waiting for the day that they pick him up again. And I'm waiting for the day that they try Ladd again. Because Ladd went back there and it didn't work out, and now he's on the island. I'm just waiting for the time that Chicago tries it again. Much like the Oilers of the 80s, Chicago knows who's been able to win with them and tries to bring those guys back at a later date if they can. In terms of players from this roster that I think will make the Hall of Fame, Kane, Keith, Taves, Hossa. Automatics on all 4. Anybody outside of that, it's not even really all that debatable. Really. Those are your Hall of Fame talents. So you guys can let me know what you think in the comment section below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. And if you're a Hawks fan, no offense meant whatsoever. It was a damn good team. It sucked that they went through my favorite team to get there. And it took me 6 years to get over it. Is it 5 or 6? Yeah, 5 years. It took me 5 years to get over this loss. That was the one. If you want to know why I hated Chicago, it was this series right here. And it took me 5 years to get that taste out of my mouth. But they were better. They were the better team. Anyways, thank you for watching. I'll talk to you again soon.